Aquarius, let me ask you something gently. Have you felt it lately? That quiet sense that someone hasn't really stopped thinking about you. Not love, not regret, but something unfinished. They're watching. From a distance. In silence. And the truth is, they've reached a point where silence no longer works. If you're open to receiving this message, type "I'm ready" in the comments. Just that. Because what's coming next isn't about going back. It's about clarity, release, and a conversation that changes how you see the past forever. Take a breath. Stay with me. We're just stepping into the story now. Aquarius, stay right here with me for a moment. I want you to imagine this as just the two of us. No audience, no labels. Just a quiet space where you don't have to explain yourself. Lately, something subtle has been happening around you. Not loud, not dramatic. Almost easy to miss if you weren't as aware as you are. It starts with a thought, out of nowhere. A name you haven't said in a long time. Then a memory. A feeling in your chest that doesn't ask permission. It just arrives. You tell yourself it's random. Your mind wandering. But it keeps happening. You notice familiar symbols showing up. Songs, numbers, moments that feel oddly specific. And there's this quiet sense, like someone is reaching for you without touching, thinking of you without speaking. Aquarius, this isn't about fate or fantasy. It's about awareness. You've always been sensitive to invisible currents. You feel shifts before they have names. You sense when energy moves long before words catch up. And right now, something old is stirring. Not to pull you backward, but to be seen clearly for the first time. There is someone who never fully closed the door on you, even when they walked away, even when silence stretched longer than it should have. They carried you quietly, in the background of their days, in the pauses between decisions. And while you were growing, evolving, learning how to breathe more freely, they were watching, not in a way that invades, but in a way that hesitates. As if one look at your life now might confirm what they were afraid to admit, that you changed, and that they did not. Aquarius, I want you to hear this clearly. Their attention does not mean obligation. Their awareness does not mean destiny. It simply means something unfinished is asking for air. And here's where your strength comes in. You don't chase echoes. You don't need closure wrapped in apologies. What you need, and what you're ready for, is clarity without weight. The kind that frees you instead of binds you. You may feel moments of heaviness rise. Brief flashes of emotion you thought were gone. Let them pass through. They are not setbacks. They are signals of release. You are not here to reopen old wounds. You are here to understand why they existed. And as this awareness grows, something shifts inside you. Subtle. Quiet. Like the air changing just before dawn. You don't have to do anything yet. No decisions, no conclusions. Just stay present. Stay open. Because what's forming now isn't about the past returning. It's about truth finding its voice. And when it does, you'll know exactly where you stand. Not because someone tells you, but because you finally feel it. Just stay with me. There's more clarity waiting in this silence. Aquarius, there's something I want to tell you quietly. The person connected to these feelings hasn't moved on the way they thought they did. On the outside, life continued. Days filled up. Responsibilities took shape. They told themselves they were fine. But inside, time didn't move the same way. They keep drifting back to moments that feel warmer than the present. Small scenes. A look. A laugh. The way something felt when it was still simple. Not because the past was perfect, but because it felt honest. There's a sense of lack they haven't been able to name, like reaching for water and realizing the glass is empty. They feel it most in quiet moments, late at night, early mornings. They want connection, not just attention, not just comfort. They want what felt real. And yet, they don't say it. They swallow it down. They distract themselves. They convince their mind to keep going forward, even when their heart keeps turning back toward you. Aquarius, you should know this part. Their longing isn't romantic fantasy. It's unresolved truth. They replay conversations that never finished. They wonder what would have happened if they had spoken sooner, or stayed a little longer, or been braver when it mattered. But here's the quiet weight they carry. They know you're not the same person anymore, and that scares them, because going back would mean facing who they were, and who they failed to be. So they stay suspended, half moving forward, half anchored in memory. That tension builds, slowly, silently, and you feel it because Aquarius, you're tuned to emotional undercurrents others ignore. You sense when someone's thoughts keep circling you, even without words. But listen closely now. This isn't your burden to carry. Their stuckness doesn't mean you are meant to wait. Their nostalgia doesn't mean you owe them access to your present. What it does mean is that a truth is pressing against their chest, and it's getting harder to hold back. You didn't cause this awakening. Your growth did. You chose clarity. You chose honesty with yourself. You chose to move forward without pretending. And that light you carry now, it reaches places you don't even see. It touches people who never fully healed when they left your life. If a part of you feels heavy when you think of them, pause. Breathe. That weight isn't asking you to return, it's asking to be understood. Sometimes, the past resurfaces not to repeat itself, but to finally be acknowledged without illusion. You're not here to rescue anyone from their memories. You're here to stand in truth, calmly, without shrinking. And as this awareness settles in, something else begins to soften. A knowing, a steadiness. You realize you don't need answers right away. You don't need to chase clarity. It's already moving toward you. And when it arrives, it won't feel chaotic. It will feel quiet, almost relieving. Just stay open to the moment when silence finally decides to speak. Aquarius, there's a kind of silence that doesn't mean absence. You know this. You've always known. This is not the silence of indifference. It's the silence of someone holding their breath for too long. They care deeply. But caring became complicated. Somewhere along the way, they started telling themselves that staying quiet was safer. That not speaking was a way to protect what little balance they had left. So they stayed still?
Careful.
Measured. They didn't know how to begin without opening something they were afraid they couldn't close again. And every day they waited, the words got heavier. Unsaid feelings don't disappear. They collect. They press inward. They turn into pressure behind the ribs. You've felt this kind of pressure before, haven't you? That tightness that shows up when truth has nowhere to go. Aquarius, you sense it in them because you recognize it in yourself. You know what it's like to hold back, not because you lack courage, but because you see too many outcomes at once. They were trying to keep the peace. In their life, in yours, in their own mind. But peace built on silence never lasts. What they didn't realize is that the longer they stayed quiet, the louder everything inside them became. Thoughts looping, memories replaying, questions with no answers. They wondered if you'd changed too much, if the moment had passed, if speaking now would make them look foolish or weak or too late, so they watched instead. From the sidelines of your life, and every time they saw you standing more fully in who you are, the pressure increased. Because silence works only until it doesn't. Aquarius, there is a point where holding back becomes more painful than speaking up. They are reaching that point now, not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but in quiet cracks, sleepless nights, moments when they almost type a message, then stop. Moments when your name rises to their lips, uninvited. You don't have to do anything about this. Your role here is not to fix their hesitation. Your role is to stay grounded in your own clarity. You've grown into a version of yourself that doesn't chase noise. You listen for truth. You trust timing. And timing is doing its work. When silence stretches this long, it changes shape. It stops being empty. It becomes a message all its own. Sooner or later, it has to speak, even if the voice trembles, even if the words come out imperfect. When it does, Aquarius, I want you to remember this. You are not responsible for how long it took. You are only responsible for how you receive what arrives. With calm, with boundaries, with self-respect. This moment is not about reopening old chapters. It's about letting the truth breathe so you can move freely again. And as you sit with this, feel how steady you are now. How much less reactive, how much more anchored. That steadiness is your protection. Just stay present. The quiet around you is shifting. I want you to stay with this feeling for a moment, Aquarius. Because there's another layer to what's been happening, and you can already sense it. They haven't stepped forward, but they haven't looked away either. In quiet ways, almost unnoticeable, they keep watching how you live now, how you move through the world, how your energy feels lighter, clearer, more self-owned. They notice the small things, the way you choose peace over reaction, the way you no longer explain yourself the way you used to, the way your presence feels calm, even when life around you isn't. And sometimes, without meaning to, they compare, not out of judgment, out of longing. They place who you are today beside the version of you they remember, and they realize something that's hard to admit. You didn't just change. You grew. That realization does something to them. It pulls them closer in thought while pushing them back in fear. Because to move toward you now would mean meeting you where you stand, not where they left you. And that's where the conflict lies. They want to reach out, to hear your voice, to feel the familiarity again. But at the same time, they feel blocked. By circumstances. By pride. By emotions they never learned how to name. They wonder if they still belong in your space, if they would recognize themselves next to you, if speaking now would expose how much time they spent standing still. Aquarius, this push and pull isn't about control, it's about courage. Watching feels safer than acting. Observation doesn't require vulnerability. Silence doesn't risk rejection. So they linger there, half present, half hidden. And you feel it as a subtle awareness, not invasive, just present. Like being looked at through a window, rather than called by name. But here's the truth I want you to hear, quietly and clearly. Their attention does not define your worth. Their hesitation does not diminish your progress. You didn't evolve to be admired from a distance. You evolved to live freely. If part of you feels uneasy about being watched, honor that. It's your intuition reminding you that visibility doesn't always mean access. And if part of you feels seen, finally, breathe that in, not as validation, but as confirmation that growth leaves an imprint. Sometimes people don't miss us. They miss who they could have been with us. And that's a heavy thing to carry alone. You don't need to confront this. You don't need to prepare a response. You don't need to decide anything yet. Your only job is to remain where you are, grounded, aware, open, but not unguarded. Because this quiet watching cannot last forever. Eventually it asks a question, or it becomes an answer. And whatever form it takes, you will meet it differently now. Not with confusion, not with urgency, but with calm understanding. Just let yourself notice how steady you feel in this moment, how much space you've created inside. That space is important. Something meaningful is already moving within it. Stay with me, Aquarius. We are still right here together. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when holding everything inside becomes heavier than finally letting it out. That moment is approaching. For them, it does not arrive with confidence. It arrives with fatigue, with the tiredness of carrying words that never found air, with the ache of knowing that silence has stopped protecting anyone. They reach a point where the unsaid begins to speak louder than anything they could actually say. They replay the opening line in their head, again and again. They imagine your reaction, your pause, your voice, and every time, they almost stop themselves. Not because they want to manipulate, not because they expect a specific outcome, but because truth feels dangerous when you have lived without it for too long. Still, something in them understands this. If they remain quiet now, they will carry this weight much longer than they can survive. So the idea of a conversation forms. Not dramatic, not perfectly planned, just honest. A moment where defenses soften, where explanations replace assumptions, where what was hidden finally finds language. Aquarius, this is important. This conversation is not driven by desperation. It is driven by release. They are not coming to pull you backward. They are coming because they can no longer pretend that nothing happened, that nothing mattered, that you were easily forgotten. They need to say what was never said, not to change your mind, but to change their own relationship with the past. And you will feel it when it happens, not as shock, but as recognition. There will be a calm beneath it, a sense that something long suspended has finally touched the ground. You may notice emotions rising in you too, not overwhelming, just present, memories brushing against your awareness, old questions losing their edge. Let that happen. You are not here to perform. You are not here to prove anything. You are here as you are now, grounded, clear, whole. If you choose to listen, you will listen from strength. If you choose to speak, you will speak without urgency. And if you choose silence in return, that too will be honest. This moment is not about winning or losing. It is about truth being allowed to exist without punishment. Sometimes people need to speak so the story can finally rest. And sometimes we listen so we can stop carrying endings that were never ours to hold. You don't have to decide how this lands yet. Just notice how prepared you are to receive it without losing yourself. That readiness didn't come from them. It came from your growth. From the way you learned to sit with discomfort without abandoning your values. From the way you learned that clarity is kinder than avoidance. As this awareness settles, you may feel something easing in your chest, a subtle opening, a quiet permission to breathe deeper. That's not anticipation, that's alignment. Just stay present. The air is shifting again. Stay close, Aquarius. Let this moment breathe. When the truth finally finds its way into the open, it doesn't arrive quietly. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because honesty carries energy and energy moves things. You may feel it first as heat, a tightening in your chest, a sharp awareness you didn't ask for. Anger can rise, not explosive, more like a sudden clarity that says, I didn't imagine this. I wasn't wrong. There can be a flash of grief too, not for what was lost, but for how long you were left without answers. You might realize how much space you held open for someone who never told you where you stood. How many times you softened your own questions to keep the peace. That realization can steady it. These emotions are not here to punish you. They are here to return your power. For a long time, you lived inside uncertainty. Not because you lacked strength, but because you trusted too much in silence. And now the truth shifts the weight. It moves responsibility back to where it belongs. You may notice old feelings surface, memories you thought had faded, moments that suddenly make sense in a new light. That doesn't mean you're going backward. It means your mind is closing loops it never got to finish. Aquarius, anger doesn't always mean resentment. Sometimes it means self-respect waking up. Sometimes it means you finally see where your boundaries should have been honored. And here's the part I want you to hold gently. This is awakening, not damage. You are not breaking open. You are becoming clear. There is a difference. Pain asks us to relive. Awareness asks us to understand. As the truth settles, you may feel a strange calm underneath everything. Like standing in the eye of a storm that is already passing. You can listen without absorbing blame. You can acknowledge without reopening wounds. You can feel without losing your center. That's growth. You are no longer the version of yourself that needed validation to feel real. You no longer need someone else's words to confirm your worth. If anger moves through you, let it pass through cleanly. Without stories. Without rehearsals. Just sensation. Just honesty. Ask yourself quietly, what am I finally seeing clearly? What am I ready to stop carrying? You don't need to resolve everything in one moment. Truth does its work in layers. Gently, precisely. And as this awareness deepens, you may notice something else. Compassion. Not for what they did, but for how you survived uncertainty and still chose integrity. That matters. You are allowed to feel all of this without judgment. Anger and peace can exist together. Clarity and tenderness can share the same space. This moment is not here to reopen old pain. It is here to close a chapter with your eyes open. And as you sit with that, feel how steady your breath has become. How grounded you are in your body now. That steadiness is your signal. You are ready for what comes into view next. Stay here with me, Aquarius. Just a little longer. There is something gentle but important I want you to understand now. And I want to say it the way a friend would. Without pressure. Without fear. Not every return is meant to last. Some people come back not to stay, but because they cannot carry the weight of unfinished truth any longer. They arrive at a moment when holding it inside begins to feel dishonest. To themselves. To life. So they speak, not to rewrite the future, but to finally release the past. This can be confusing at first. Because part of you may wonder, why now? Why after all this time? But timing is rarely about convenience. It is about readiness. They did not return because you waited. They returned because they could no longer avoid what they felt. And that distinction matters. Aquarius, you are not being tested here. You are being respected, perhaps for the first time. Truth does not always come with an invitation to stay. Sometimes it comes as a quiet offering. Take this, so we can both breathe again. You may notice that once the words are spoken, something shifts immediately. Not in your direction, but in the space between you. The tension softens. The air clears. The weight you did not know you were still holding begins to loosen. And you realize you were not waiting for them. You were waiting for clarity. There is freedom in that realization. Because when someone comes only to speak their truth, they are no longer asking you to carry their uncertainty. They are setting it down themselves. That is not abandonment. That is accountability. And you, Aquarius, are allowed to receive that without guilt. Without feeling like you owe more. You do not need to keep doors open out of kindness. You do not need to reopen chapters out of compassion. Sometimes compassion is allowing a story to end honestly. If part of you feels relief, honor it. If part of you feels sadness, let it pass gently. Both can exist without conflict. You are not cold for choosing peace. You are not distant for choosing truth over hope. You have learned something essential. Connection does not mean obligation. Understanding does not mean attachment. And the most powerful form of love you can offer now is clarity without control. As this settles in, notice how grounded you feel. How your breath moves more freely. How your body no longer braces for what if. That ease is not emptiness. It is space. Space for relationships that meet you where you are. Space for conversations that do not require silence to survive. Space for a future that does not depend on unresolved endings. They came to speak because they needed release. You listened because you were ready to let go. That balance is rare, and it is deeply human. Just sit with that for a moment. Let the quiet feel earned. Let the stillness feel kind. Something beautiful always begins when truth no longer needs to follow you. Stay with that feeling. Stay with me, Aquarius. Let everything settle now. After all the words have been spoken, after the truth has found its way into the open, there is a quiet moment that follows. It feels different from the silence before. This one does not ache. It does not wait. It simply rests. You begin to see them more clearly. Not through memory, not through longing, but through understanding. You recognize who they were, who they tried to be, and where they fell short. And strangely, that clarity softens you. Not because it excuses anything, but because it releases you from carrying questions that never belonged to you. You understand now why things unfolded the way they did. Why timing never aligned. Why silence lingered longer than it should have. Not everything was meant to grow. Some connections are meant to teach. Some are meant to awaken. And some are meant to end quietly, once their truth is spoken. You may notice how your body responds to this realization. Your shoulders relax, your breath deepens, your thoughts slow down. That is relief. Not the kind that comes from getting what you wanted, but the kind that comes from finally seeing what you needed. Aquarius, you were never meant to go back. You were meant to move forward with your eyes open. You don't need answers to return to something familiar. You need clarity to step into what's next without hesitation. And now you have it. There is power in knowing without resentment, in understanding without attachment, in letting go without regret. You are not closing a door in anger. You are closing it with respect. For yourself, for the journey, for the growth that came from walking away when nothing was explained. If you feel lighter, trust that. If you feel calm, honor that. This is what liberation feels like when it arrives quietly. You are free from wondering what you missed, free from replaying conversations in your head, free from waiting for someone else to define the meaning of the past. That meaning now belongs to you. And what you do with it matters. Aquarius, you are not someone who settles for half-truths anymore. You are not someone who stays in spaces that require you to shrink. You have learned how to walk with integrity, how to hold compassion without sacrificing yourself, how to leave with grace instead of doubt. That wisdom will carry you forward. And as you stand in this clarity, notice how open the space ahead feels, how unburdened, how full of possibility, not because something ended, but because something resolved. Some people return only to give us back our freedom. Some conversations exist only to close a circle. And that is enough. You don't have to look back anymore. The path ahead doesn't ask you to carry old weight. It invites you to walk lighter. Just take a moment, breathe that in. This quiet certainty you feel now is not an ending. It's the calm that comes when you finally stop asking why and start trusting where you're going. All right, Aquarius. Before we part tonight, stay with me for just a few more breaths. Because here's the part most people never tell you. Sometimes the greatest sign that you've healed is not that the past disappears, but that it can no longer pull you out of your center. Think about that. The fact that you can listen to this story now without your chest tightening, without your mind racing, without needing an answer immediately. That's not coincidence. That's growth. And maybe the real reason they couldn't stay silent anymore was never about them at all. Maybe it was life's way of showing you just how far you've come. Aquarius, you were never meant to chase clarity. You were meant to become it. And tonight, if something inside you feels calm, seen quietly steady, trust that. If this message found you at the exact right moment, leave a comment that says, "I choose clarity, not for me." For the next Aquarius who needs to see they're not alone. And if this space feels safe, if this voice feels familiar, subscribe and stay close. We're building something here, slow, honest, real. Because the journey doesn't end with one conversation, or one truth, or one release. Another message is already forming. Another layer of understanding is on its way. Until then, remember this: you are not behind, you are not broken, and you are not meant to live in questions anymore. You're meant to move forward with trust in yourself. I'll meet you right here again when the next message arrives.